Did the Denver Broncos just strike the perfect deal with their number one wide receiver? How will Courtland Sutton's presence continue to further the development of Bo Nix in year two? And has a new face here in Denver finally found a perfect fit and a perfect home with the Denver Broncos? All things to come on today's rundown, where we are once again live from Broncos Park, powered by Common Spirit, for what ended up being the second consecutive day of fully padded practices for your Denver Broncos. We got the first taste of that yesterday. Got to see some pads popping and some hitting finally, something that I know that players on the defensive side of the ball are sometimes much more excited about than their offensive teammates. And it was interesting to see some of the development. You got to see another pretty decent day from Audric Estime, who was in there making some plays, taking advantage of the size and the physicality that he plays with to help keep his name in the race and in the running in a crowded running back room that is clearly headed by J.K. Dobbins and R.J. Harvey. Mike McGlinchey got back into the action a little bit today after being more of an observer than a participant yesterday. And Courtland Sutton found himself on the field for the first time since signing his new extension. And that is where we will begin today's show with the news that came just about 45 minutes after Sean Payton stepped down from the podium following yesterday's practice. And that is that your Denver Broncos and Courtland Sutton have agreed to terms on a 4-year, $92 million contract extension with just over $41 million fully guaranteed. Sutton said at the beginning of last offseason that he would not play under his $14 million contract with the year that was remaining on the previous deal. He was willing to skip voluntary OTAs and threatened to miss certain mandatory team activities. Ultimately, it didn't come to that. They juiced his contract with some incentives, all of which he hit. And the unspoken narrative was that the team would take care of him the following offseason if he went out and proved to them what they wanted him to do. Sutton follows that up with an 80-plus reception season for just over 1,080 yards and 8 touchdowns. And we now reach a point a handful of days into the official start of training camp 2025, where the receiver has now inked a contract extension that could likely keep him a Denver Bronco for the entirety and the remainder of his NFL career. It's been noted by Zach By and others here at Denver Sports 104.3 The Fan that this contract extension and the assumed production that will come with it could put Courtland Sutton very much in contention for Ring of Fame level conversations as someone who is already flirting with and likely will jump into the top 5 statistically among all receivers who have ever worn a Denver Broncos jersey. And for Sutton, the contract questions and the things that loomed around that are finally put to bed. He was out there at practice today, making an impact much more noticeably than he had in previous days. Wasn't the full-blown explosive day that we thought we might see yesterday afternoon when the contract was signed, but clearly they were ready and willing and happy to ease Sutton back into things as he becomes a more full participant in Broncos training camp. And his positioning and his standing within the team is going to be vital for the continued development of Bo Nix, who's entering his sophomore season. Bo Nix already, with some of the work he was able to do with the limited offense they had last year without a running game or the presence of a true secondary wide receiver, has shown that he has the potential to be an elevator of talent and somebody that can get more out of his skill position players, especially the receivers and the tight ends, than other quarterbacks in Broncos past have been able to. But make no mistake about it, Bo Nix still needs his favorite weapon. He still needs his wide receiver one. And while Courtland Sutton, and you may argue, and some have, that Courtland Sutton is not a wide receiver one on a number of teams around the NFL, that's almost irrelevant at this point because he is the Broncos' wide receiver one. And the 135 targets and 80-plus receptions that he and Bo Nix connected on last season show that the starting quarterback for the Broncos, the potential future franchise quarterback for the Broncos, clearly has chemistry and connection and the potential for development alongside Sutton. So that was all the more impetus in the narrative to try to get this deal done, which they finally do just after Sean Payton took the podium after yesterday's practice. And the timing of this extension, where you might say, hey, 4 years, Courtland Sutton's going to be nearing the age of 35 at that point. Are we really going to be worth paying $23 million a year for a guy whose production at that point will probably have fallen off to a somewhat noticeable degree? Maybe, but that's the reality of the situation that you're in and the window that you have with Bo Nix's rookie contract. You can afford to pay to lock that down now, along with the likes of a Zach Allen, a Nick Bonito. If he had it his way, certainly a John Franklin Myers, who's been very vocal on social media about his desire for a new contract. Then you have sneaky, underrated signings like Alex Palczewski, who's going into a contract year this year after signing a 3-year undrafted free agent deal in 2025. And with Courtland Sutton, prior to this extension, he was making or scheduled to make $14 million during this 2025 season. Ironically, which he said he wouldn't play on, he will indeed play for $14 million against the salary cap this season. It will be fully guaranteed. And according to Mike Kliss, our 9 News Broncos insider, next year's contract will be fully guaranteed as well. And over the life of it, he will get to that $23 million per year average, which ranks him 16th among wide receivers in the NFL. So at the $14 million mark, he was making less than his former number 2 receiver in Jerry Jeudy, who makes just under $18 million a year with the Cleveland Browns. Now he gets vaulted into the 16th spot in terms of average annual value for wide receivers in the 2025 season. And that, frankly, is where I think he should be. That is appropriate, given there are 32 wide receiver ones in the NFL. If you want to say that Courtland Sutton is worse than half of them, that starts to get to be a little bit of a hairy argument and discussion because, frankly, Sutton has put together almost 2,000 yards and 18 touchdowns over the last 2 seasons. That's not numbers that to necessarily shake a stick at. Beyond the nuances of where he ranks and what he has going for him, he being Courtland Sutton in 2025, this contract extension between the Denver Broncos and Courtland Sutton is a rare win-win, and you could argue a home run for both sides. Because if you're Courtland Sutton, you're looking at a 4-year extension. You get the money you were asking for at $23 million a year, so you're not as underpaid as you felt that you were, and you get $41 million guaranteed on the back 9 or maybe even back 6 of your NFL career. So for Sutton, that's a huge win. You also don't have to move at this stage in your career, and all of the slogging and the fighting that you as Courtland Sutton went through the revolving door at quarterback and all of the interchanging parts around you that were featured on losing teams. You now get locked in alongside Bo Nix, who's a quarterback that has instantly turned the Broncos back into somebody who's considered a winner. And then from the team perspective, you're not paying mega wide receiver money at a position that continues to, we see it continue to inflate and inflate and inflate in terms of the value and the average money you have to pay out every year. So you get to do right by a player who has stuck it out with your franchise and has been productive with almost every quarterback that this franchise has thrown his way. You get to do right by him. You get to make sure that you are not responsible for doing anything that could dangerously stunt the growth and development of someone you view in Bo Nix to be your franchise quarterback. And he seems to clearly be happy in the process of it. This has been a rare win-win for the Broncos and another slam dunk and feather in the cap for George Payton, Sean Payton, and the Broncos front office. Courtland Sutton is now somebody who is going to remain in Denver for a long time, but somebody who just got here in Dre Greenlaw may have tripped and fell into what I believe could be an absolute perfect fit in a new home here in Denver, Colorado. Obviously, Greenlaw comes from the San Francisco 49ers, where he was such a prominent piece on that team, ultimately injuring himself during the Super Bowl with an Achilles injury that kept him out for a good chunk of time the following season. And injuries have been the primary thing that has kept Greenlaw from maximizing his potential at the NFL level. Because when healthy, we've seen the difference in San Francisco that he can make. And the idea and the gamble that George Payton and Sean Payton are making is that Bo Lowry and their strength and conditioning and position staff, as they've been able to do for each of the past 2 seasons, will continue to make the Broncos one of the least injured teams and healthiest teams in the NFL, contrasting the opposite end of the spectrum, where they were one of the most oft-injured and hurt teams in the NFL year in and year out. So that gamble paying off for George and Sean Payton with the likes of Dre Greenlaw, his fellow former 49er Talanoa Hufanga, J.K. Dobbins, now adding in the likes of Drew Sanders and Alex Singleton, who just in that inside linebacker room alone have experienced injuries in this early portion of training camp. That's the gamble that the Broncos are hoping pays off, because if it does, Dre Greenlaw is going to fit seamlessly into this Broncos defense. When you look at a player coming into a new team, there are a multitude of different factors that you can look at when it comes to projecting how they will fare. One is ability. Two is fit. And three is opportunity. And if you look at all three of those things for Dre Greenlaw as a member of the Denver Broncos, the ability is unquestioned. When healthy, he is a heat-seeking missile, a ball-hawking sideline-to-sideline linebacker that plays with a level of toughness and physicality that the inside linebacker position for the Broncos maybe hasn't seen since the likes of Al Wilson. And you can make arguments for specific players before and after that. But if you're just going to use that as a potential barometer, that's the kind of ability that Dre Greenlaw brings to the table. When you look at the fitting alongside Alex Singleton, who's returning from a pretty significant lower body injury himself, and the aggressive physical nature with both of them play, and the opportunity that they have to be true run stuffers together, and they've both talked at length about the way that they can be cohesive together and how each of them impacts the other's play on the field. The fit seems to be there to be a steadfast rock in the middle of an already talented defense where you have a strong pass rush and interior defensive line, and you have the reigning defensive player of the year headlining a talented secondary. Dre Greenlaw has the opportunity to be a presence in the middle of the field for the defense that we really haven't seen for some time, dating, I guess, maybe back to the connectivity between Brandon Marshall and Danny Trevathan during the Super Bowl run. And then there's opportunity. And the opportunity for Dre Greenlaw to go from a team that was perennially considered contenders in the 49ers, and it felt like injuries and health was often the reason that they got derailed, alongside maybe subpar quarterback play that plateaus after a certain point. But he has the opportunity to go from that and come to Denver when they are on one of the biggest upward trajectories in recent team history. We're talking about the first time in a decade or so that the Broncos have instantly rebounded and are considered true contenders, not just in the AFC, but in the NFL in general, coming off of a wild card appearance in Bo Nix's rookie season. So the opportunity is there for Greenlaw to fill a void that has lacked experience, that has lacked firepower, and has lacked depth. He now has the opportunity to do that. And Greenlaw, when asked about coming to Denver and leaving San Francisco, gave a pretty heartfelt and poignant answer when he talked about being a foster kid. He said, quote, "I was a foster kid growing up, and there wasn't a lot of times that people wanted me. So it made me feel special. It made me feel like this is the place where I need to be." And I think that George Payton and Sean Payton, in the early returns, where we've now had 2 consecutive days of padded practice, that Sean Payton alluded to, is a day where a guy like Dre Greenlaw and the skill set that he has pops off the page. I think both of those gentlemen would agree with Dre Greenlaw in the sentiment that he has a opportunity and a fit here in Denver that will allow him to maximize his ability and continue this next chapter of his NFL career. We will continue to monitor all things Denver Broncos live here from Broncos Park, powered by Common Spirit, for Training Camp 2025. We will see how the rest of the week progresses. The more and more Courtland Sutton integrates himself back into the offense. There's been some interesting nuances along the running back room about the moving and shifting going on there. As J.K. Dobbins and R.J. Harvey solidify themselves as starters, it becomes the back end of the room that is in focus between Jaleel McLaughlin, who's probably the leader in the RB3 race, Tyler Bidet, and Audric Estime, all fighting for that spot. We will be live tomorrow at the exact same time and the same place, where we will catch you live for Training Camp 2025. I do what I love what I do. Second nature to put in the